I would like to invite some of the speakers on stage for the roundtable, but I do need to ask for those of you who are here. We do have our last speaker, Sanjay, who's just in the back, sorry, from Microsoft, an expert on the metaverse. And I know many of you want to hear about the metaverse, so I do ask if you can stay on just a bit longer. Instead of finishing at 5:30, we're going to finish at 5:40, and I hope that's okay. And then the apéro, where you can ask Joanna your questions. So those of you on the panel, please come up. But I would like to actually invite and introduce one special guest. Oh, if you can go back to the previous slide. Katka Letzing, who is the CEO and co-founder of Kickstart Innovation. So Katka actually started really in Asia, and really with Startup Malaysia as well, where she started activities around 2013 in innovation and in startups. She took that passion and she co-founded Kickstart. Oh, I can't hear anymore. Kickstart Innovation as well, and has been recognized even by the White House for her innovation and diplomacy as well. So thank you very much for being with us. And I'm going to invite you to take a seat, and as well other speakers who've been with us today to also take a seat as we enter our panel discussion as well. For those of you in the audience, this is the moment you can be interactive as well. So feel free to actually join us on Slido, use the QR code behind me as well, or enter in slido.com, the number below, and feel free to ask your questions as well during Slido, and we'll see if we can get a few of these for the next 20 minutes before we invite Microsoft to talk about the metaverse. I'm not going to reintroduce everyone on stage, but I'm going to direct my first question to Katka. So Katka, many individuals, I'm actually from California originally, but I'm Swiss.
I saw your background in Berkeley. I lived there for a couple of years. So.
And Berkeley, indeed. And I get a lot of questions around why Switzerland. When we look at innovation, technology regulation, we heard as well, why Switzerland?
So I think it's a very loaded question, but I will try to be brief. So, my background is, as mentioned, I lived in many other countries and moved to Switzerland just 9 years ago. So I was one of those expats learning about our innovation ecosystem. But at the same time, was also starting Kickstart. And Kickstart is connecting startups from Switzerland, but also globally from many different countries, with organizations in Switzerland in the public and private sector to work on commercial projects. I think there's a lot of amazing opportunities in Switzerland. We work in many different verticals. So for example, in finance, of course, in health, but also in food and retail. And we have seen many other topics connected to sustainability and digitalization. I think our startups really come to Switzerland because they feel that they can really connect on the niche kind of things that they can work on. Many times they can also scale much faster. But as all we know, there's limitations to Switzerland on the basis of if you want to scale, it's not, it's really not the easiest country. But in the same time, it happened to us many times that there will be startups coming from many other countries to tackle Switzerland as one of the first European countries, because it has a lot of presentation and representation of the quality. And so we have seen that there are startups who make it in Switzerland and then scale even further. And I could speak for many different of the verticals and the topics, but I will maybe let other speakers, and we can come back to it with examples or so.
Can I ask one follow-up question? Sorry, and then I will go to the speakers. If then you look globally, so for Switzerland, if you were to pick a role model example, where you would say this is what you would invite others to follow in terms of innovation, in terms of the steps they took to take an idea, what would that be?
I couldn't understand the first half of the question, I'm so sorry.
If you have an example, taking a bit more of your global experience, of what you can advise individuals to be as a role model example of taking an innovation from one part of the globe, transporting to another, and then
it really depends, I think, of the audience. So, if you speak of the startups, I think, with open innovation or the innovation, people always say, okay, you have to really kind of see how the innovation can work. I think the ecosystem are quite different. It happened to me so many times, and people say, okay, you were in Silicon Valley, so we're just implementing now in Switzerland. This is not how it works, right? So it's more just to say, okay, what is the ecosystem really strong about? And there are some funny examples that it happened to me, for example, with a failure. So I give you an example because originally I'm European. And it happened to me that I was pitching to the investors in Silicon Valley with my solution. And in that time, they will say, hey, so I was pitching for 3 million in that time for one of the solutions I was working on. And they kind of said, okay, why will we invest in you? So I went through all the spiel. And in the end, they kind of say, okay, I will have the last question for you. And say, yes. Oh, when did you fail the last time? And I said, I'm originally European, so I never fail, I'm perfect. And the investor was looking at me and said, I'm not going to give you this money. And I was like, why? And he said, I'm not going to be your first failure. So I went home, bought a really big bottle of wine. 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, there was a conference, and I'm walking down the down the hallway, and I can see the investor, and I was horrified because I'm like, oh, he's going to make fun of me, And he said, oh, I remember you. Do you remember how to fail now? And I said, yes, I fail every day. Let me tell you about all the challenges. And he said, okay, you can call my assistant, and we are going to, arrange a meeting. And I got the investment. And why I'm saying this as an example is that I think something as a failure in Switzerland is still a little bit kind of in that stage that a lot of startups are really scared to fail. A lot of the corporates we work with, failure, it's not something as part of success also to say, I tried and it's not working, and we can pivot and we can do other things. And so this is definitely something that was quite challenging for me in the beginning when I started working in Switzerland with startups and organizations and public and private sector to kind of say, hey, failure is part of the process. It's actually fine. This is how you innovate. This is how you focus. This is how you grow. So those will be maybe some of the examples. From the startups, we have over 400 alumni, so I don't think you want me to talk about many examples because we'll be here over the apero.
Yeah, no, I love that example of fast fail almost, right, and failing. I'm going to maybe ask Chantal as a follow-up from that. Do you have actually a story, particularly you talked about brand tech and brand reputation and the link of reputation, maybe of either a success story or a failure story that you want to share that made a real difference to a company in this ecosystem?
Actually, I have a story where you have both. Actually, for me, a failure is when I am not able to convince a client to go in the right direction. And for example, I have a client that is working in a construction company. And I started to speak with him about, it's a long-lasting client, I started to speak with him about sustainability. And he said to me, oh no, Chantal, you're not going to start with this bullshit again. So, but I really insisted time after time about this, telling him that it was in his activity, it was the best added value he could offer, as institutions, of course, are the main clients for this type of activity. And finally, we succeeded in, well, with one of his, let's say, transport company, we succeeded in investing in, let's say, the first 40 tons load with electricity, and in fact, yes, it was a very, very big success because they were the first one. We were able even to put this on the press and TV ad, and it brought him actually a real added value as it was a point of differentiation towards his competitors. So that's
a great
the
example.
failure success story.
That's a great example. Thank you. Jarno, you talked, Chantal just talked about change of mind, right? Actually accepting something when you're not ready to accept it. One of the challenges we heard today, in addition to technology and regulation, is change management. Can you talk a little bit maybe about your payment journey? We talked about what were the change management aspects that you would actually advise if someone was to do that again, that you would really recommend? Or tips around that?
I believe internally you can talk about, let's say, this transition from the, say, plastic cars and any other support, any other possibilities in terms of payments, right? So this was a big jump for the industry, again, enabled by this tokenization technology, but also, let's say, from normal employees who was saying, okay, what is going here, right? So we move payment credential to other support, to other players like Apple, Samsung. They say, okay, but we don't want to share anything with those ones, right? But actually, it was important to do so because it really, let's say, gave a lot of traction, let's say, to payments to be used instead of the typical cash payments that we have before, right? So I think this was something internally, and externally was exactly also the mindset to say, okay, I don't have to pay anymore just with a card or online, but I can do a lot with the smartphone or with other supports. This has been a pretty nice experience to live.
And any advice moving into the change management almost in that? Because as you say, there's disbelief until almost way after the adoption has happened. So for the next change that we're getting ourselves ready for, how do you prepare for that?
I think the next change is already happening right now, right? Because we have a lot more players in the industry. So before it was like the banking sector was very closed and just banks could work there, right? And more we have other players, financial service industries, but also other players like for security, like for the road regulation and so on. So we have many players, and the big deal here is really to opening up the system, but enhancing the system actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cecile. So I think, sorry.
Can I answer the
Yes.
question, why Switzerland?
Yes, why
Because
Switzerland, please?
Actually, I mean, then I'm happy to answer your question. We have been asked many times, and we are fighting against actually some other countries. When you have foreign financial institutions or just a startup or whoever, usually they don't come from Switzerland. Maybe you have one or two guys from Switzerland, and then you have others from abroad, and etc. So it's not Swiss-based company that comes wanting a license from FINMA. So when it comes from abroad, we do always have to do those tables where we explain how the legal system works, how the tax system works, and you have those super complicated charts with all the Switzerland, UK, US, France, and then etc. And so yes, why Switzerland? We are fighting actually against some other legal frameworks, and I have to admit that sometimes we lose because they choose then another jurisdiction. I would think that mainly it's because of costs and timing. Of course, FINMA is not the fastest regulator, and of course, given that we are based in Switzerland, legal advisors and employees and etc. do have a cost that might be higher than in other countries. So we do lose sometimes, but most of the time, hopefully, we win, and they choose Switzerland. And why Switzerland? Because we have a legal framework that is set, that is not going to change, that can evolve if needed. And this is not always the case in all jurisdictions. So first, I think the fact that we do have this DLT framework that we have, and we don't have like thousands of other laws that are in the pipeline, that gives certainty to the legal framework, and I assume also for tax. I'm not a tax specialist, but I see that our tax treatment is also competitive. And the fact that we can discuss with the authorities, with FINMA, with the tax authorities, you can discuss with them. So I would say that's why Switzerland.
And can I ask even further, because that was a great answer, and I was actually going to bring it back to Switzerland in terms of the regulatory framework. Is you talk mostly about FINMA in terms of the bank regulation for digital assets. What about for the other tech industries as well that we touched upon today, like fashion tech or...
So the other techs are not, for example, fashion tech are definitely not covered by FINMA. Maybe where we can have access, I mean, when all of the FINMA will only regulate financial institutions and, how can I explain it quickly? And also some financial intermediaries, so when the money flows from one person to the others. Yeah. So FINMA will only be regulated with that. We see some other people from other sectors that come to us basically when they are treated with NFTs, that's those non-fungible tokens. And you have art pieces that are sold with NFTs. And then here, the NFTs are on the blockchains, they are considered as token. And depending on the setup of this NFT, then they might have some implication for the financial sector. But basically, that's how we get the others to come to us.
I was going to ask that actually. We talked to Jean-Baptiste about NFTs, and I think Snoop Dogg has NFTs worth 17 million, the most valuable 5 million. So the Port de France, might actually look at how do we actually safeguard NFTs and how secure is it?
I mean, NFT, usually if they just represent something that is real, you don't have to come to me. You can just sell it. Forget about paying me fees.
Super.
And
Super.
so that's good.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
I am going to ask if there are any other questions in the room. We only have a few more minutes left, but Edouard. I was going to ask you actually how secure NFTs are, but maybe outside the practical example as well, you also talked a bit about the change management aspects. And we also talked about now having the experience and building off that experience. Because what's interesting is you talked about a journey, right? And therefore, it's not just what you did in the first year, it's what you did in the 10 years. Taking that analogy for somebody who's taking the step now, right? Because we speak to a lot of financial institutions who are only now taking the step. Can they accelerate that? What would you advise for them to maybe achieve that same transition in maybe not such a
So to me,
long
they
time
need to
frame?
have the right strategy at first and understand what they can do and can't do. We had the chance to be in a non-regulated environment, so I could move to the cloud very easily. So that's the first thing. So define a strategy, and then to me, you know, I'm an IT guy, but I always worked as a business guy. So you have to take the business needs into account and not like just be driven by technology. So, for example, we're talking a lot about metaverse that we'll discuss, I think, afterwards.
Yes.
We're actually doing events in the metaverse, but not because it's a new technology, but because during COVID there was a need to gather people together, and that's why we did those events in the metaverse. And this is also part of the change management, because people didn't know how to get together, so let's find new solutions. And let's adapt to those solutions, because you can't really stay in a Quest 2 for an hour. It's not very convenient. So you have to organize shorter events, you have to be more direct and change the way you organize things. So yeah, that's what I would advise.
Do you think you had to go through the journey to get to all the final steps, or do you think that you can actually jump? And a lot of people talk about moving, how Asia moved right onto mobile. They skipped the entire transition.
Yeah, today the technology is mature
now,
enough so that
yeah.
you can jump to the last stage. You can put all your data in the cloud, secure them. It will just require quite a lot of work and a good team for that, and good consultants, because you can't do everything in house. And I had the chance to be accompanied with good people and to be successful. I didn't do that by myself. Good team and good consultants. Yeah.
Yeah, super. Thank you, André. And then I want to have everyone think about actually one question as we're going. I'm sorry. Is, as we're going to do last, because we have entrepreneurs in the audience as well, is sort of what is your one trait that you've seen as successful entrepreneurs? I'm going to ask everyone around the table. But André, actually, as Edouard talked about, good consultants, right? Good partners actually supporting through the journey as well. Again, where would your advice be if you were talking to somebody who's just starting on the journey, not just moving to cloud, but also moving into new adoption of new solutions? Because I think that what COVID's also put is the ability to really accelerate a lot of that transformation. If anything, it demonstrated across industries who had technology debt and who needed to hop across the next, and make that leap to advance that technology debt and to move forward.
Yeah, so the first thing, very important, and as Edouard says, is to define the strategy you want, what is for, what you want to raise maybe your business to this new kind of technology. Is it a helper? Is it just because it's cool? Or really you have a need? And we were talking about the identity, the change management, the governance, the technology. It's a support, but that's the first step you have to think about is what is it for? And then you have the journey will start from this thinking, and then you will embrace the step by step, and you should go with a few steps for the beginning, and then you can accelerate, and then you can put more technology in, and that's very important also to have good people driving you in this kind of journey, because the mindset is very important. We are not talking really about technology. It's a culture. It's change of the way the company work, and the way of people will work in this company, and bringing them in this new world. Edouard was talking about the metaverse, but that's also the case in the cloud. Working differently means you need to change your habits from 20 or 25 years, 30 years. And that's the most difficult. So it's very important to, from the beginning, to tell to the people they will change the way they work, but it's to have a better work at the end, and be more convenient, and be more agile, and more fun.
I think Skylar was playing the game in the very beginning on what do you buy, what do you build, right? Based on your strategy and how your strategy influences buy and build. And as we were hearing stories, right, kind of bank out, I was curious if we played that story with every company and with different cycles of your life, right? Which one will you buy and build as you go through? So,
I should say you have the technology part where it's the driver you can use to go through. Then you have also the, as we can also say, brand or the business objectives. Yeah. And at the end, you have the decision makers where they will give the rhythm about the change you want also to push inside this new kind of way to work. So you know, I should say you never stop, because you must keep it on the top of the, I should say, the stair, you know, really to be able to continue this journey.
Absolutely. I'm afraid we're out of time, so I'm going to ask Katja actually to have her one adjective on what makes a successful entrepreneur out of all the people you've seen doing, and then I'm going to invite Sanjeev Kumar to the stage.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it has been, you know, like I work a lot with the corporates every day. I work with startups. I was sitting on both sides, working, or three sides, working for government, working for corporate, and built my businesses on my own. And I think one of the traits for me was always focus, because there's so much excitement. There are amazing startups there are amazing things, but I can see that a lot with, for example, with corporates when we work with them, you know, say, hey, which startups we should work with? And it's kind of really on the focus. Hey, I really like the comment, like, I'm a nice guy, but I'm also a businessman. So on that level, I think it's the same way. In the end of the day, it's about what is the return of investment. And so it's really kind of finding the focus on, hey, these are the solutions that I'm really trying to solve. This is the match to the startups or to the innovation. And then it really goes also, I think, what we spoke about, what can be in Switzerland, opportunity and challenge in the same time. Does it fit in with legacy systems? Does it fit in the regulatory issues? And so for me, it has been really kind of one of the traits, even I will have to always do a million things, to really focus and to see, okay, where are we really going? But in the same time, not to be afraid to try many things, because usually one of them really works out always in the end, so.
Thank you very much. I think everyone here will be here for the EPIHO as well, so thank you very much for your participation. Thank you. Merci.